Steve, welcome down to 160 Studios.
Great. I'm so glad to be here, Joe. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. You and I go back. Well, first of all, we walked into, I had to put a jacket on today because I walked into the green room and you and I were sporting our Johnny Cash.
Yep. That's
nothing,
okay.
Nothing but like, I walk in, I'm like, oh, fuck, I never wear, never wear black on.
It's the same thing.
So, but yeah, you and I have been together, gosh, we've known each other for at least 20, 25 years.
Yep.
Right? Going way back when.
Yep.
And you've been in contract manufacturing, good part of your career?
Well, I started out selling extruders and extrusion systems to all the contract manufacturers in North America, Asia, and mainland Europe. So from that, I gained a lot of experience and know-how, who the players are, what their capabilities are. And then I got into the contract manufacturing space, Adam Spence, Spectrum Plastics.
Yeah. And now you're at US?
Yes, US Extruders.
Yep, and up in Charlotte.
My home office is in Charlotte. Our headquarters are in Rhode Island.
Yeah, in Rhode Island. So there's a lot of contract manufacturing out of that Rhode Island, Boston area.
Yeah.
And I want to go into it because there's a whole history.
Yeah.
You and I saw contract manufacturing change, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago to become the real obvious backbone of the industry. How are you tracking that in your mind?
Yeah. If we go back 15 years, for instance, extrusion companies, medical extrusion, there used to be a lot of medical extruders. And the OEMs tried to push more of the value chain down to the extruders, saying, hey, in addition to this tube that you're providing, can you tip the distal end? Can you overmold a hub? Can you do some braiding, punch some holes? So they started pushing more and more of the value to the contract manufacturers. They brought in those capabilities. Now there's very few just medical extrusion companies. They're mostly, full service contract manufacturers. The first one that comes to my mind back 15 years ago is Adam Spence.
Of course,
yeah. That was one of the original contract manufacturers. And as you know, I have some experience there when Mike Yanish and Van Street bought that company. And we actually rebranded it back to the old name, Adam Spence. And we had a video that was like 20 years old that showed all their capabilities. And Mike and I used to just love watching, even though it was 20 years old, it showed all those different capabilities that they had, which are capabilities that most contract manufacturers have today.
Yeah, and a lot of those processes, to your point, used to take place in the big OEMs, right? So if you were an engineer, and I think that was because the catheter technology wasn't as complicated as it is today. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. The more modern catheters, structural heart, EP, neurovascular, are a lot different from the legacy catheters that we saw 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. And it almost seems like innovation is happening now from the contract manufacturing side back into the OEMs. And I say that because if you're an engineer in a large strategic, let's say J&J, Medtronic, any of the others, just insert name here, you only know, especially if you're a youngin', you only know what you were taught on the floor there. And what you were taught on the floor there was not the most leading edge manufacturing processes, because that core competency has been outsourced to partners. And so, I love your insight as to the new innovations that are happening in that catheter-based technology, especially neuro and cardiac, are about material choices, process capabilities, and then joining technologies, if you will. So take us through that.
Yeah, so traditional composite catheters for delivery systems. Let's just start with kind of a legacy angioplasty, right? Or delivering a stent to a closed artery. Pretty basic setup with a lubricious interliner, PTFE, some kind of braid reinforcement that gives the ability for pushability, torque response, and then kind of an outer jacket, materials of different stiffness from proximal to distal, really soft, and put them in an oven and reflow them together. That model has changed a lot with the introduction of metals in catheters. So more catheters are metal-based now. Talk about materials like nitinol, cobalt, stainless steel, and laser cut hypotubes, where you can laser machine cut patterns within a tube to give you all that functionality, torqueability, pushability, flexibility. So it's changed the way catheters are developed these days. Yes, this hypotube costs more, but it's less of a manufacturing burden to manufacture. So a lot of these more modern delivery systems, neurovascular, electrophysiology, structural heart, are becoming more metals-based catheters.
Yeah. And as these delivery mechanisms, if you will, or even diagnostic tools, it seems like it's coming down to who has the more sophisticated, advanced process and automation equipment to perform the process.
Yep.
I was in Israel recently. We were there on a delegation maybe 2-3 months ago. We went into a manufacturing facility, I won't say who it is, in a company that manufactures their own catheters in the neuro space. And we had a film crew with us. All the cameras had to go off when we walked into this very sophisticated braiding process in a room that all the machinery was custom made, right? All the machinery had a very unique process built into it. And I go back, and I'm going to go back. This is like a little reminiscing for me. You and I have a good friend, Danny Kasperzek, right? Yep. So I think Danny built his chops leaving the OEM world into machine solutions for building a way for Cordis to go ahead and wrap the balloon in onto a catheter.
Yep.
That was a process, a folding mechanism, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's a perfect example. And that's how we started building all these unique machine capabilities to fulfill these different requirements for a catheter, in that case, folding and pleating a balloon. And a lot of those unique capabilities traditionally were kind of made in-house, right? It's like these technologies weren't commercially available. There wasn't a company besides Machine Solutions to get some of this technology. And so there's still little tidbits of that kind of homegrown technology out there that nobody could do it and get into it because it's not commercially available.
Yeah, and boy, did you uncover, I want to unpack something there, which is really exciting to me because I'm a geek engineer. And you and I have, you mentioned it before, let's take a company like Vance Street Capital, right? So Vance Street, Mike's done a wonderful job, and his team over there, just great guys too.
Yeah.
What you invariably get in the PE world, and I want to go into the PE model, private equity model, is they'll go out and they'll seek out these privately held, often family held companies who have a very unique tribal knowledge to them. And generally, this magical process or capability is part science, part black art, because the three people have been there for 32 years.
Yeah.
And they know how to, insert process here. And what they've jerry-rigged the machine here, and they've sort of done it on the machine here, and they've taken and they've monkeyed with it and tuned it in. And then that creates another capability on a medical device or a delivery system that nobody thought of before. And then PE will come in and say, hold on, freeze that for a second. How do we scale that? How do we scale that and provide now to the big strategics something they can't possibly do? That's the way it feels like it's grown in that world.
Yeah, no, I've heard Mike say when he's looked at certain companies, hey, great technology, but how do you scale it? And that's that's not going to work, right? You could have a great design, but if it's not manufacturable or scalable, it's not going to go very far.
And the same thing with the process too, right?
Yeah. And the process too, if you develop this unique technology, it needs to give you high process capability, meaning high PPKs, CPKs, very defect. It's medical, right? We have to be 99.999% defect free. So those processes also have to have very high process capabilities and repeatability.
Let's talk about private equity for a second now that I brought it up. Private equity really is the machine. You said something before we started. There were probably more bankers at MDM West than there were manufacturers. How are you seeing that industry be influenced by PE, private equity? Is it a good thing? What are you keeping your eyes on from your vantage point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think overall it's a good thing. You look at Van Street Capital and some of these other organizations, Inverness Graham, they put together these really great companies, putting different capabilities, bolting on different capabilities, and being able to participate in some of these more modern applications and catheter delivery systems. So I think it's a good thing. At the same time, I hear after MD&M West, one of the leading just medical extrusion companies that's still available, a good size, good EBITDA, everybody's after them. And everybody's trying to meet him at the show, and the guy was like, I can't stand these effing bankers. After the show, it's like, I'm sick of talking to these guys. I need time out. Give me 6 months to think about this.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
so it's a double-edged sword.
Because you got to face it, you've been building this thing, and by the way, MDM is my favorite show. We chat about this, is that show in medical device, there's not more of an authentic, true, engineering core event in all of medical device. These are the people who over the years, because all as entrepreneurs we've done this, we've cashed in our life insurance policies, we've traded in our 401ks during the toughest times just to keep the lights on. And when you walk that floor, it's the heartland of med device and literally the heartland of America. It's no mistake that most of those tend to be, in the heartland of America. And so I love to see these individuals now and the executives on their squads now enjoying a potential exit. And then provide a platform for the next generation even to amplify that so we make better products for patients.
I know a lot of these individuals that have cashed in their 401k to start a company. And if you ask them if they do it again, in a heartbeat. There's also a little bit of a disconnect. You take a person like that who did that and cashed in his 401k to start a venture, a lot of hours, right? Every night, weekends, busting your ass every day. And then you get to a point where, you start to get these people calling you. You get to your EBITDA to a certain level, they're honing in on you. It's like, okay, maybe it's time to get some additional funding, take advantage of what PE can bring to the table. But there's also often like a cultural disconnect, right? Because now you need to have a pipeline, maybe use Salesforce. Now you need to have a little more structure in how you do business. And that's not the way they were used to doing business. So oftentimes it doesn't really work out. So the cultural part is, I think, one of the missing ingredients there when PE's looking at these companies. I don't know how to measure that, but that's one of the downsides that I see is this cultural clash.
And it's interesting you bring that up because I was just having a conversation with one of the principals out of a big PE company, and that was the exact conversation. I said, look, I've built enough of your companies with you. And I see you bringing in, and thank God they're not Harvard MBAs, right? And Columbia MBAs, especially with what's going on today, right?
No offense.
No offense, right? Offense intended.
Yeah,
but
right.
No. But you're bringing in these professionals who are professional leaders, professional managers, right? Professional money managers, and you've got this family. And again, I cut my teeth in a Swiss screw machine company for about a year on contract manufacturing. Literally, it was a Swiss family on Long Island, and like everybody there was like a family. And now as a headhunter for all these years, and I watch the acquiring company come in, and I watch the integration plan, and then how you're bringing in these new people that are meant to do inadvertently a brain drain on the natives, on the incumbents. And if that is not orchestrated properly, and if that integration is not orchestrated properly, we've seen it with large OEMs, they screw it up. But that's almost a sterile environment. This way, it's almost two families coming together. And and there's a couple out there that do it really well, really, really well. And what do? They have a plan, and they give it time. Right? Because the quickest way to screw up an integration is to rush it. Right? And communicate clearly, align economic incentives for everybody. And then once all those are aligned, then you tend to get a better integration. But what happens is the wrong PE companies are managing an Excel spreadsheet on ones and zeros, And that is the tail that wags the dog oftentimes, and you longitudinally take that down range and you blow the acquisition.
And you can easily track this if you're looking at it, because you just look at LinkedIn after these things happen. Chief engineer, gone. You know, you see all these people, people leave because of that cultural.
And it's tribal knowledge that's going out the door as well, more than usual, right?
Can't replace these people.
No, because you know what it is? It's like you think you have 80% of it, and then all of a sudden the chief engineer's gone, and something happens, and the team who just came in is like, shit, I don't have the answer to that one, right? And 80% doesn't necessarily get you there all the time.
That's why you've seen a growth in these specialized consultants that kind of come in and say, hey, we lost a couple of these people, we're struggling, can you come in and help train our new people, because the people with that tribal knowledge have left. So it's created this interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and that contract manufacturing world has a number of levels to it, doesn't it?
Yep.
You had shared with me that you were having a conversation with somebody in the industry, and you haven't heard of a contract manufacturing startup going out of business yet.
Right.
Give me a little bit more.
Yeah, no, somebody, another example of somebody that started a company with their 401k, was part of an acquisition. A couple of years later, decided to do their own thing after non-competes ran out. And okay, should I do this? Is there a risk? Well, I've done it before. I was very successful. And if I look around, other people that are starting new organizations in this space, I don't know any that have gone out of business. So yeah, it's a very attractive market.
Yeah, especially if you know what you're doing.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
And you have a good reputation.
Yeah. That reputation's really important.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, you know, you go to MDM and you go to, you know, Van Street's event, and, you know, Bonifaci always has a good one as well.
Yep.
And it's the same clan, like, and it's just whose house is the party at.
Yeah.
And the camaraderie in that business is really impressive. And what do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because they're all fighting for some of the same cheese too.
A lot of them are competitors, right? And everybody's friends.
Yeah.
You know, I do the podcast, right? And nobody's complained to me, say, hey, you had such and such on the podcast talking about this technology. That person's a competitor. Nobody's ever said anything. Everybody loves to hear from their competitors. They don't want to hear IP. You know, we don't divulge things like that. But in a way, everybody's friends. It's great.
And I wonder if it's one of those things that when you look across the room at somebody who's been through what you've been through, you just know.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's any silver spoons in the contract manufacturing world if you're a founder.
Yeah.
Right? So I think everybody has been sort of ruffled up, beat up,
Yep.
had their successes, had their losses the very next year,
Yeah.
overbuilt, underbuilt,
Yep.
and they're all like, okay, you're still here.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Another part of that, Joe, is the contract manufacturing space in medtech is a bit incestuous. You might get components, purchase components for a catheter from your competitor. That particular company might be the leader in that particular component, whether it's PTFE or whatever it is. So you sometimes are doing business with your competitor.
Yeah, that's important, and it doesn't do anybody any good to throw anybody under the bus.
Right.
Right. Even if there's a reason to.
Yeah.
Right. Even if there's a reason to.
Yeah.
So.
And there's probably plenty of reasons to.
But everybody's dependent in that food chain. Everybody's dependent on the other.
Right. Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
Well, look, I love sharing the history of this. This is our first session. I know we've got another one coming up, but appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming down with us.
Thanks. It's been great, Joe.
Thanks. I'm Joe Mullings from 160 Studios. Be well.